Good afternoon and welcome once again to the group exhibit Hydrogen Fuel Cells and Batteries at the Hanover Fair 2016. Please do come in and join the conversation. If you raise your hand at any time, I'd be happy to come around with the microphone so you can ask your questions. Otherwise, we do have table service, so please do come in and join us. Up next, we have Power to Gas Energy Storage in Germany. With me from ITM Power GmbH is Phil Doran, the Managing Director.
Thanks. Hi.
Thank you for joining me. So let's start with a brief overview about ITM Power GmbH.
Okay, well, I'll start with an overview of ITM Power PLC because the GmbH is much, much smaller. And I'm the Managing Director of the GmbH. ITM Power makes electrolysis machinery, which you can see one standing right there. We're in... We bill it as clean fuel and energy storage, where energy storage refers to storing vast quantities of hydrogen, essentially in the natural gas grid, either as hydrogen or as synthetic natural gas. So that's one of our business streams. We have in Germany at the moment, I think, 3 power-to-gas plants. One was built by RWE. One was built by the Tuga Group, which is the Germans would call it an association, and Anglo-Saxon would call it a holding company of about 110 utilities, and they got together about 4 years ago, and they looked at what will power to gas, or what will PEM technology, PEM hydrogen generators, what will that do to their business model? It was very, very forward-looking of them. Other players are coming in to do the same. So to try and be short, the first thing we did was with Tuga over 3 years ago. We've got the longest deployed PEM system in the world, we believe, certainly in a power-to-gas configuration. Then we've had RWE. We've got another smaller plant out there in Hamburg. And we've just won our first 1 megawatt unit, which has been effectively bought by DLR, but managed by another Stadtwerke or a civic utility called ZIAG. That will be deployed next year. Not in Germany, in other areas like the United States and in England, we have filling stations, and that's what we mean when we say clean fuel. And the clean fuel is effectively using hydrogen now as a treibstoff or as a fuel for vehicles. We opened our first public filling station in the UK last August, I believe.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We will be opening one new station virtually every month for the rest of this year. Not exactly every month, maybe every 6 weeks. We're opening another 8 stations in the UK this year, mainly based around London. So the focus in Germany has been power to gas. The focus in the UK and California, we have a filling station in California, has been clean fuel.
Excellent. So just coming back a little bit to power to gas, let's start from the basics.
Okay.
What is power to gas?
Okay, it's a rather confusing term, power to gas. There's lots of gases. So the gas part of power to gas actually refers to the gas network. So it's a little confusing. I guess we're going to come up with terms like, or we're already hearing them, power to hydrogen, which will probably mean a clean fuel. Power to methanation, which is clearly for the natural gas grid and is gas. But the actual phrase power to gas, the gas bit refers to the natural gas grid, and it normally means directly injecting hydrogen into the gas network.
Okay, so just like there's an electrical network, there's a gas network, and that's what comes to every consumer, comes to industry, and we're talking about putting hydrogen in it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so when we're thinking about Germany in particular, power to gas in Germany, what is the political climate, or what is the environmental climate more so, that motivates looking at putting hydrogen into the national gas network?
Okay, well, that's really quite interesting, because we have a bit of a conflict in terms of our timeframes. The policy timeframe runs out to 2050. And we're looking at two key variables here that have an impact. And they're different policy drivers, but they're combined in terms of, we're looking by 2050 to get CO2 output in the whole economy down by 80%.
From what levels?
From 1990.
Okay.
And we're looking to get 80% renewable electricity by 2050, sorry. 80. And that's a huge driver for people who are prepared to look longer term. The shorter term, we have a problem. And the problem is we have conflicting regulations, as it were, and rules, whereby, so for example, power to gas plants in Germany, I don't know if they all do it. It's very, very complicated, and you'd really need to speak to a utility to get the absolute details. But one of the problems we have is we have a thing called the EEG-Umlage, and that is essentially an end-user fee. So in Germany, if you take electricity from the grid, and every kilowatt hour consumed, you have to pay 6.2 or 0.29 cents. So effectively, 0 in Germany equals 6. And in some countries, 6 is the production cost. And that has a huge impact on your operating costs. So we have this rather strange rule. Well, the rule itself is not strange, because this EEG-Umlage actually is paying for the Energiewende. So when you turn the turbines down or you're bringing in new technology, this 6 cents means that the consumers of electricity are actually paying for the Energiewende, so it's not coming out of central government coffers. So it's not a tax burden on the government. But it's a burden on the companies who want to produce hydrogen. So it makes hydrogen very expensive, unnecessarily expensive. And at the same time, we've got this, if you like, this long-term policy, this long-term structural goal, which will take us away from fossil fuels and put us into a new type of technology, which is renewables, and it's intermittent. So the internal logic of that particular policy drives you down the road of hydrogen, as well as other technology as well, but predominantly hydrogen, I would say. So we're going to look to a point where we've got this long-term goal, we've got this effective tax on the production of hydrogen, and at the same time we have no provision for supporting the storage of that hydrogen. So I would say short term we've got real problems. It's slowing the commercialization of the product down at a time when we need to get it out into the field. So particularly the Stadtwerke or the civil utilities in power to gas could learn, what can this technology do for us? It's an unbelievably flexible technology. There are many cash flows that you can realize from it. And it's being slowed down by this effective tax and then this block on storage. So until they get that sorted out, I think it's going to be a bit slow for now.
All right, so there was a lot of information in that, so let's unpack it a little bit. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the Energiewende.
Yeah.
So we have lots of members watching who aren't from Germany necessarily.
Yeah.
Could you explain to us what the Energiewende is?
Well, Energiewende is a bit like a rucksack or a kindergarten. It's becoming English, but hasn't quite made it yet. Some of the Germans say it's Altbayerisch. But anyway, Energiewende, a translation of it that the Financial Times was using is an energy transition. And what they're trying to convey with that, which I think is much more succinct in German, is they're trying to convey that we are moving from one basis of energy generation to another basis of energy generation. And that cannot be underestimated in what it means. If you look at energy in terms of the type of good that it is, energy is the biggest complementary good in the whole economy, bar none. And what I mean by a complementary good, you have a car and you have petrol. You have a DVD player and you have a DVD disc. So virtually nothing works without energy. It is that important to get it right, and that's what's so frustrating about the short-term problems that we have. So the energy vendor, in short, is the energy transition.
The energy transition, including goals for 80% reduction in CO2 and 80% renewables in the electrical grid by 2050. So if you have 80% renewables in the electrical grid, you need some way to buffer when you have peaks and troughs. The grid becomes unstable. So could you please explain how power to gas helps with that issue?
Sure. In the summer, we have long days. We have a lot of sun. We have wind. We don't use a lot of electricity compared to the winter. We don't use as much heat compared to the winter. So in the summer, we're generating, or will be at that level, and even before then. And that's what's so frustrating. We don't need to wait to get to 80%. We're getting close to a trigger where we need to start promoting the technology actively now. But the way it helps is, so in the summer you've got excess energy, and you need to shift that energy to the winter. So you've got less radiation, shorter hours, weaker, and you've got a huge heat demand.
You're heating a lot more in the winter,
exactly,
sun shines
and
in the
electricity.
summer.
And you've got to be able to move that somehow. And the way to do it is the gas network in Germany, I think, well, the whole gas network has a capability of storing about 450 terawatt hours of energy.
So huge amounts.
Huge amounts. Not a problem.
Yeah, so when you're talking about other storage technologies like batteries, you might use them on a day-to-day basis, but if you need large amounts of seasonal shifts, then your gas network is going to work.
I think we face, I don't think we want to make the mistake that one technology is going to rule the world any more than we ever believe one company is going to rule the world. It'll be a multi-technology world, and it'll be applications dependent, and there is nothing there's no way you can store that quantity of energy outside of the gas grid.
And so do you need to change the infrastructure of the gas grid at all to put hydrogen in it, or how much hydrogen can you put in?
Okay, that's a sort of a back to the future question. When I was a kid, we used to take town gas, and looking around, there are a few guys around here, and no, not so many ladies, but some guys around here that will remember town gas. Town gas was made from coal. It was 60% hydrogen. And everybody used it like that because we had no natural gas. We discovered natural gas in the 60s. As we moved into the 60s and 70s, all the appliances in the economy had to be changed over. all the stuff in the economy had to be changed over so that the appliances could operate on such high quantities of hydrogen. But I think where we'll go is hydrogen has a calorific value of about 1/3 of natural gas. So when we say we've got 450 terawatt hours of natural gas in the network, we would only have about 150 terawatt hours of hydrogen. So it seems to me that the next step in this evolution will be, there'll be some hydrogen in there because it's cheaper. You don't need an additional piece of equipment. Where we will go is the synthetic natural gas, and the synthetic natural gas will then be able to meet the calorific requirements.
And this synthetic natural gas you make directly from the renewable hydrogen that you produce from the excess electricity from too much wind, too much sun.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So you're saying the natural gas grid can automatically have more hydrogen because it has in the past, and anyways we're going to move to eventually synthetic natural gas, so it's not that different.
Exactly.
Excellent. So let's come back to this, the point that you made about the barriers to commercialization. You were talking about there essentially being a tax, and so that's every unit of hydrogen produced that goes in.
No. It's not really a tax. It's a surcharge. Right. So on my bill, every time I use a kilowatt hour of electricity, on top of my bill that I get from the utility, there's this 6 cents charge. And that is a surcharge rather than a tax.
Directly from the utilities?
No, from me. I pay that 6 cents.
Yeah, okay.
And then it's redistributed within the energy industry to the renewable guys.
Sure. Okay, so if you are producing hydrogen, the electricity that they're using to produce hydrogen, they're
then they would be double dipping.
I see.
Yeah, but if that's the case, I understand if you can prove that you don't get charged on one way or the other. I'm not absolutely sure of the details because it's so small anyway. But I believe if it is used for repowering, then it doesn't have the surcharge.
Okay, but you would argue to remove the surcharge altogether for...
Any new technology, if you're dealing with in German, a bahnbrechende Technologie, or you're dealing with a disruptive technology, and believe me, this technology is disruptive. It will change business models. It will change the way we produce electricity and energy in general, and it will change the way we consume it, particularly when the fuel cell entity or component is brought in. And any new technology trying to enter the market faces huge hurdles, not least the existing technologies. I've invested, and we've all invested in a certain type of knowledge that we all carry around with us, and we defend that knowledge. And the incumbent technologies defend their knowledge, and we have to come up against not only the ignorance of the politicians, and I don't mean that in any derogatory sense, I mean ignorance in the sense they don't have the time to absorb all that because they have to absorb so much more. But while we're waiting for them to get over that ignorance hurdle, we also need to get over the hurdle of the resistance that human beings naturally have to something that's new.
So would the reduction or elimination of the surcharge be sufficient, or how would you further motivate
I would say
storage?
It's a necessary but not a sufficient condition.
What is a sufficient condition for
I think a set of necessary and sufficient conditions would be the abolition of the fee plus a storage feed-in tariff of some kind.
Okay, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Do you have recommendations of what that would look like? Or?
I personally don't, other than structurally it would look the opposite of what we've got now. You don't pay the 6 cents, but you get something back for storage, and that could be hammered out.
Okay, and that would help reach commercialization, bridging the gap.
I think, particularly again amongst the Stadtwerke or the civic utilities, Germany's energy industry reflects its history. In around 1848, you had something like 316 different principalities. Before that, there were even more principalities. Now we've got somewhere between 800 and 1,000 civic utilities, very unlike France or the UK, these highly centralized economies. These Stadtwerke, or certainly some of the guys we're speaking to, the more advanced thinkers, and there are not that many of them, unfortunately, but the more advanced thinkers realize we need to understand what this technology is going to do to our business model. How can we profit from this? So the question is, what's the price of hydrogen? The response to that is with the question, what's the application? If I can use it as fuel, I can get a lot more money for it. The Stadtwerke or the civic utilities want to look at how they can continue to stay in operation and also use this technology. I know from some of them that we speak to, if the 6 cents was gone, more of them would begin to acquire the technology. If the 6 cents was gone and there was a storage benefit, then even more of them would jump in, and the technology would come out a lot quicker. No two ways about it.
Okay, well, I won't hold my breath, but I am interested to see how this does play out. Unfortunately, we are out of time unless there's one quick question. If not, Phil Doran, thank you very much for joining me. If you are further interested, their booth is right next to us, B66, and they have an interesting video, really short, easily describing power to gas, what it is, and why it's beneficial for the Energiewende.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please do stick around. We have the next talk coming up in just a minute called Bipolar Nickel Metal Hydride Batteries, Rethinking Power. From Nylar Battery, we have the product manager, Magnus Dalen. Thank you.